Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now today we return to the elevated Goodsyard area that I've been working on probably over at least the last few months, and I'll make a few more developments in this area. So with the raised goods yard, one of the particular areas that needed addressing was the change in level, of course, between the goods yard and, of course, where the station is. And that was always going to be some form of retaining wall. Now, I've been sitting on the fence a little bit with the retaining wall because I wasn't really quite sure what this retaining wall might be made out of, whether it be brick or stone or some kind of block work. But I've now decided what type of material will be best to use in this area. So I think without further ado, let's just jump into what I got up to. So the area in question is this component running along here, and as I mentioned, I've been sitting on the fence for quite some time, just sort of figuring out what is the best option here in terms of the type of brickwork, and in the end I've decided on using the same brickwork as the goods shed and the railway station, because I kind of felt, well, maybe they were built or constructed around the same time. So what I'm using to construct this retaining wall along here is the Metcalfe red brick sheet. So this sheet comes in two thicknesses. It's sort of quite a thinner, almost sort of papery type stock, and then there's a heavier weight stock. So I'll be using both, and I already sort of went ahead and designed up a retaining wall which is very similar to some of the Metcalfe pre-cut components that you can actually purchase, and I think the top of the parapets of the viaduct kit, and also a number of other bridge kits and so forth that have this style of brickwork. So I've got other parts of the layout which have this style, so I've kind of mimicked it to a certain degree in order to sort of imply that maybe quite a bit of the infrastructure was built in the same period. So what I've actually found the easiest method to produce the parapet type structures was to design them up on the computer and then directly laser cut them from the actual Metcalfe brick card sheet. And as long as I lined up the laser cutter to align with the horizontal line of the brickwork, it produces a nice crisp edge and it's accurate. And the interesting thing too, of course, is the laser cutter, because it singes the edge of the card, it by default eliminates the white edge of the card, so I don't think I really need to colour the edges of the card. I think it's going to be reasonably well disguised. So once they were cut out, of course, they were quite easy to pop out. This time around I did actually leave a little wee sprue or tab in the cut line so that they didn't all just pop out, because sometimes with the air assist it actually blows the inserts out of the card. So this is the first time I've actually used a system where there's like little sprues to hold everything in place, and it actually worked really quite well. So looking at the structure along here, and the idea is I'm going to slot in a piece of 3mm MDF, and that is going to run along here. Now this strip that I've cut out is much higher than what I actually need. It's actually going to be a bit lower than this, but the reason why I've given a bit of excess is because, as per a lot of components on my layout in a lot of different areas, nothing's actually straight. So this actually rises up a little bit here. There's nothing I really can do about it unless I do major surgery. It dips about here, there's a little bit of a rise there, so, and then of course you've also got the incline down there. So the plan is, what I'm going to do is just temporarily anchor this into place, wrap it around the corner, and then I'm going to mark a line along here, and that'll give me a true representation of this baseboard or this level. So once I've done that, then I can mark the upper edge on the inside of here and then work out the height that I need, and then trim this down to the exact height so that the pre-cut components of the brickwork can be attached. So the idea is that I will cover this strip of MDF both sides completely in the thinner of the brick material, and then of course attach the thicker laser cut brickwork over the top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this temporarily and work out the baseline for running along here, and then of course we'll trim that to suit the shape. So we'll be back in a second. Right, so I've now trimmed the MDF to suit this lower level, and also trimmed the height so that it suits the brickwork that is being laser cut. So the next phase now is I'm going to apply the thinner sheet of Metcalfe brickwork to both sides of this MDF, and then we can actually start applying the laser cut brickwork over the top. You'll see that I've temporarily removed the goods shed at the moment, and also I've just taken out this bay platform siding just for easier access. Now, one of the main reasons that I'm getting on to actually doing this retaining wall is because once this is done, I can actually start looking at ballasting through here. And one of the questions I actually had, and somebody may be able to help answer this question, is what happens to the track that's inside the actual goods shed area? Now, is that ballasted, or does it have some form of hard standing? I'm assuming maybe it does have some form of hard standing, and I'm wondering whether maybe I just do a continuation of the cobblestone inside the actual goods shed area, and maybe a little bit coming out, and then it obviously turns into ballast from that point. So if anyone can help with that, that would be great. So one of the other areas too that I've been working on, you can see a clamp that's holding a piece of MDF in here at the moment, and I've reformed this area. I've chopped off a wee bit of a corner, cut back some of the previous slope here, and what I did is made up a paper template for this particular area. So that was what sat in there, and then from that I've created another high density piece of foam, and this is actually going to slot in here, and it's just basically going to tidy up this whole area and around here, and then I'll possibly do a little bit of sculptor mold too and around here just to fill in any gaps, and there's a bit of a hole here that needs filling in as well. So that's what's happening in this area. So we'll get on and we'll do the brickwork on this. So I began the brick application operation in the garage, which was earlier this morning, and I've applied the brickwork to one side. I've yet to do this side, but I've moved the operation into my office because it is absolutely tipping it down out there, and the rain on the roof of the garage is absolutely deafening. So, and of course it's also a bit warmer in here as well, which of course helps with the glue drying. So I'll carry on and apply the brick to this side, and I'll pre-cut sections. So this is the length obviously for the Metcalfe brick paper, and we're just going to work our way along. And once we've done that, then I might move back to the other side and we can actually start applying some of the laser cut brickwork that's been pre-prepared. So we're just going to carry on gluing this, and I'm just using PVA glue. I think this is probably the best option because it's going to start to bend around that corner. It needs to be a glue that's pretty durable. Right, so that's got the other side glued up with the brickwork, and I'm just going to let that dry before I trim off the excess. So once that's done, of course, then it'll be a case of adding these laser cut brick components, which just give it that little bit of three-dimensional relief. And then once that's done, then I can put it back in position, see how it's all looking. And in terms of the inside of the wall, so the wall facing in towards the goods yard, I'll apply these components once it's set into place, because there may be a little bit of trimming to get them to fit nicely. Right, so I've left it overnight and let this completely dry for both sides, and now I've trimmed out, of course, the other side as well. So we can now go ahead and apply the laser cut components, and they're just going to be positioned up here and of course butted up against the top edge, where there'll be some, obviously, some capping stone to finish everything off once it's complete. So we'll apply all of these across the top of here, and then I think while we've got it off the layout, I'll add a bit of weathering too to grime this up a bit, because this particular retaining wall I think would actually be really quite filthy. It's right next to tracks on both sides, and I think it would be pretty sooty, pretty grimy. So we'll get to it. Right, so that's got this side of the wall complete, and as you would have seen, I've added in, of course, additional type buttresses between each of the sections. That, of course, covers up the join, and it just gives it a little bit more depth than what is there. So I'm just going to let this dry now, and I will do a little bit of weathering. I think that's really going to enhance the detail in here. So there'll definitely be weathering inside these panels where grime is built up, and then of course there'll be quite a bit of grime across the bottom edge of this wall, because of course right next to that is the bay platform siding that runs in. Right, so I've now completed the weathering, which is basically to the front face. I will do the weathering for the side that's actually facing towards the goods yard once I've applied, obviously, the laser cut components as well. So I just use my normal technique of weathering, which is ground up chalk pastels in a coffee grinder and then brushed on with nice soft brushes, and I use mascara brushes which work quite well. And there's now quite a collection of videos on my channel which feature the process that I use for doing the weathering process. So it's certainly starting to look the part, and it's definitely added some further depth to the wall, so where I've darkened up areas where grime would maybe rest more frequently than other areas. So we'll go and temporarily place this in position on the layout and just take a look and see how it's looking. Right, so I've now placed the partially completed retaining wall back into position and also place the station and Goodsyard back in place just to sort of gauge how it's all looking, and I certainly think it's made a big difference already. So of course one of the aspects I still have to do is work on the other side of this wall here, and I just positioned temporarily one of the laser cut components just to see how it's going to work and make sure that I did actually calculate the sizes correctly, and it seems to be okay. So you'll notice here I've now fixed this bit of landform into place, and that was just glued down using a polystyrene safe glue and weighted down until that is set. One of the key aspects to gluing styrene together is to, of course, rough up the underside or the surfaces of the polystyrene, which is quite sort of shiny, so it gives it a little bit of extra grip. So I think the next episode in this particular series will be completing the other side of the wall, and I'm planning on adding some further wire chain link fence around the end of these sidings here, which will join up with this retaining wall here, and then of course continuing this rather wild scenery further down into this area too. And then of course once this wall is complete, then I can really start to look at being able to ballast some of this area, which will be really good to get onto that. And of course, if anyone's able to answer the wee question I had regards to the inside of the Goodsyard, whether that is ballasted or whether that has some form of hard standing, that would be great too, because I'll work that in at the same time. So it's definitely coming together. The retaining wall is definitely a lot grimier and darker than the rest, and that's kind of really what I wanted to achieve. The Goodsyard I did weather some years back, and I did weather it rather lightly, and I think I will actually go over that with some heavier weathering, and also probably parts of the station as well, give it just a little bit more weathering so that it kind of tones in and blends in with this wall. So there we have it for today's episode, and I certainly think the area is coming along quite nicely, where we've now got some form of join between the raised Goodsyard and the station level, so it kind of fits the part for this particular area. So as I mentioned, in the next episode on this particular series, I'll actually be able to get into a little bit of ballasting, and of course carrying on some of the scenic work where there's overgrowth and all of those types of materials. Now that next video in this series won't actually be the next video, as the next video that's coming up is a little bit of a change of tact and going back to some of the early stages of the railway modelling process, but it's also looking at the development of a layout plan, and this of course has been in collaboration with Paul from Sandling Junction. So keep an eye out for that video, which will be possibly coming out in the next day or two, and it's going to be the beginning of a series that really looks at building a layout from the ground up. So I'll leave it there for today's episode. Do take care everyone, look after yourselves, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.